Good Monday morning. This is Senator Black. For today, I am Colonel Black, which I also am retired colonel. And we're going to be talking about the U.S. Army recruiting disaster, which is very dramatic. And today I'm joined by our friend Jim Jatras, who was just a tremendous member of the staff of the United States Senate, did that for many years. And so Jim, welcome. It's good to have you with us.
Colonel, Senator, great to be back again. Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege.
Well, let me lead off. I just would like to introduce our topic a little bit. The U.S. Army, the recruiting has been a disaster. In the past year, 2022, the Army fell short of recruiting goal by 15,000 soldiers. Now, that is 25% of the entire recruiting goal. Now, these goals aren't just sort of drawn up out of thin air. They're calculated based on what's needed to provide a timeline of people from the time that they're recruits to the time that they retire out of the service. So anytime you have a failure, you create a gap in that timeline, and you damage the military. So, and 25%, I have to tell you, this is historic throughout the history of the all volunteer armed forces, which goes back a half a century. There has never been anything like this. It's never happened where you've had a 25% shortfall. So, right now, DOD is pleading with soldiers who were maliciously fired because they would not take the highly controversial and experimental COVID vaccine. And the Army has been pleading with them, please come back. And but of 8,000 people discharged from all the armed services, only 43 have agreed to come back after 8 months of doing away with the vaccine mandate. That is amazing. And it tells you that the people who left angry and disgusted with the military, with the leadership, from the Secretary of Defense through the secretaries of the armed services, and in fact, from the President of the United States, President Joe Biden. He certainly signed off on this decision to expel all of the brightest and the best members of the armed forces in order to pump up the sales of COVID vaccines and to enrich his supporters from the big pharma community. All of the soldiers are just rubbish. They're people you send over to foreign wars to get their legs blown off. And then as long as there's money to be made, to be brought in from the arms industry, from the big pharma, you don't care. You don't give a rip about these people. Thanks for your service. Thanks for your legs. Thanks for your eyesight. So there's great bitterness at this. And anyway, at this point, I'd like to bring Jim Jatras in, and Jim has some equally strong feelings about this, I think.
Well, Senator, there's a number of aspects to this. As you know, there's a long history of the government using the military as kind of a social policy experiment, whether it has to do with affirmative action or feminism, or now, the rainbow flag categories, or literally guinea pigs when it comes to the vax. And it's all blowing back in their face because at some point, they actually have to use the military for something, and that's, I think, another thing. I think this maybe discourages a lot of people from especially, traditional military families, largely from the South, from the Midwest, young white males largely who want to feel they're doing something for their country, doing something masculine, doing something that's worthwhile for them as human beings. And that's been spat at and trashed for decades. The military being used for missions that have nothing to do with the defense and security of the United States, and these people being just used as expendables, just guinea pigs and really objects of contempt. And so now they're turning around, maybe because they've got a war in mind somewhere, and they say, "Well, gosh, I guess we're not going to win a war with women and foreigners and Skittles people and so forth. We need the kind of people that have fought our wars in the past." And I think a lot of these people are just saying, "No, I'm not interested. You didn't want us. We don't want you. We don't need you." And now I think they've got a problem on their hands. It's sad to see, especially those of us who, I didn't serve in the military, but as you know, I come from a military family. It's something, an institution Americans used to be proud of and wanted to serve because they felt they were serving their country. And now I guess a lot of people just don't feel that way anymore.
Yeah, when I was a boy, I used to read military history starting when I was probably 10 years old. And I wanted to be, I would read comic books I'd walk home from school. I'd walk a couple of miles several miles to save a nickel on bus fare. And I would stop at a place called Doc Moore's on the trail in Miami. And I would rest while I read comic books. I liked Donald Duck. I liked Scrooge McDuck. I thought he was funny, sitting on his piles of money. Anyway, but mostly I read Marine and I read G.I. Joe, and I was so struck by there would be the captain with his 2 bars, or there'd be the lieutenant with his single bar, and they'd be leading the charge into battle, and I thought, that's what I want to be. That's what I want to be. So, I'm going to give you an example, Jim. This is a very real life example from personal experience. It shows you the kind of people who were expelled over COVID, the kind of people who were expelled when they started purging the ranks of people who were considered a little too patriotic. Maybe they had a grandfather who had served with, not a grandfather, but a great-great-great-great-grandfather who served as part of the Confederate Armed Forces in the South. But here's an example of somebody. This girl, I've known her since she was born. She was an orphan brought over here to the United States from Kazakhstan. Sergeant Petra Reston, United States Marine Corps. She was ousted from the Marines after 7 years service, honorable service, I will add, and it was over her refusal to take the COVID vaccine. Now, here's the type of person they were booting out. In high school, before she joined the Marines, she had a 4.2 grade point average. Okay, so it was an A average. She had straight A's through high school. She had a very, very high top secret clearance and was serving in a very, very sensitive position in Washington, D.C. She had earned 2 good conduct medals, which each one represents 6 years of exemplary service. She scored expert with the rifle, and she maxed her physical fitness test. She's an avid jogger, runner, weightlifter. Now, once they booted her out, here's what she did. Now, see that when they booted her out, they stripped her of the GI Bill benefits that they had promised her and that she had earned, and they took them away. This is under the same president who tried to forgive student debt loans for all of these scoundrels who just want to beat their debt. But he stripped the military people of GI Bill that they had earned. Now, here's what she did. When she was suddenly ousted, she went home to await her discharge. She was the only person in her squadron who had not gotten the shot. She was just told, go there, you'll get your paper, you'll be gone. Suddenly she gets a call from the gunnery sergeant in the squadron. He says, you got to get back in here to serve the duty. She said, why? She says, I'm supposed to wait here. I was under orders to go here and wait till I'm discharged. He said, we got a problem. He says, everybody in the squadron has COVID except you. And you didn't get the shot. And since you didn't get the shot, you don't have COVID. So you come in and you make sure that our unit is secure, because everybody else is out throwing up and barfing and all of this stuff because they got the wonder shot. Okay. Now, here's what she's done since she was eliminated. Because she has no GI Bill, she started going to Northern Virginia Community College, where she is on the dean's list. She is majoring in cybersecurity, and on her own, she is now taking an exam to get a fairly high-level certification. She went to work at AutoZone. Working the cash register, grabbing parts, hauling batteries and so forth. She'd never done any mechanical work in her life. They liked her so much that different guys who seemed rather attracted to her, they taught her how to be an auto mechanic. And I've got some wonderful pictures. I wish I could show them, but I can't. But she and I are there in the garage. She's got the car up on jacks, and you can see all of the, she's redoing the brakes, she's replacing the struts, the rotors, all of this stuff, pretty high-powered stuff that very few people can do. So she's doing that, and then as a member of AutoZone, she ends up being the top salesman for the entire region. Now, this is the kind of person that the U.S. Marine Corps pushed out of service because they had the guts to stand up and say, I'm not going to take a shot that is derived from killed baby parts. And if you don't think this is going to hurt, I know you understand, but if people don't think that losing that quality person isn't going to gut the armed service of the United States, then they just don't understand anything about the military.
That's right, Colonel. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned a story like that, because there's so many. The parish I attend is right near Quantico, and we've got lots of jarheads that come to that parish, and every one of them, as far as I know, is in some degree of limbo or separation from the service. Maybe that's being reversed now because they need these people. But these are straight arrows. I mean, these are the best of the best, and that's exactly what they've been drumming out for years now. And now, for whatever reason, they feel they need them, and they're begging them to come back. And between you and me, Senator, I hope they say no. I hope they say no. It's because they're not going to be used for anything good. I mean, it's sad to say this force is not being deployed for the defense of this country. Are they being sent to the southern border? Are we defending our country where we're actually being invaded? Of course not. Every other border in the world comes before ours. It's so it's we're going to have a rough few years here, and this unfortunately is part of the slow motion train wreck we've been watching.
Well, in response to the issue that you mentioned, my wife gave me an article that she got. This is from CNN Politics. There were 8,000 people who were discharged for refusing COVID. And after 8 months of rescinding, after they've rescinded, only 43 have rejoined. And you can see it. There's the Secretary of the Army, Wormuth, a woman who seems to have been groomed to go up the military chain, not a military person, but military political Democrat. And she said that younger people are not as interested in joining the military today due to institutional skepticism. Now, the way that recruiting works is that if when I retired from I was a Marine Corps pilot. I fought on the ground with the infantry also in Vietnam, wounded in action. My radio men killed beside me. So I did all that. I went back to school, went on to law school, became an Army JAG officer, and ended up in the Pentagon. When I retired, I talked to a number of young people, and they would ask me about the service, and I would tell them it's a great career, it's a good place to be, a good moral environment for families and that sort of thing. And you're familiar with that personally. Your father was a squadron commander, I think, a jet pilot, and your mother was a tremendous patriot. So what's happened is, the people who make up the heart and soul of the military, they tend to have patriotic leanings, and what has happened is that as Secretary Wormuth correctly says, there is institutional skepticism by Generation Z, and it is causing a recruiting decline, she says. And what it is the weaponization of the justice system has collapsed public confidence in the Department of Justice, the FBI, the federal courts. And while millions of foreigners swarm across our borders like locusts, American soldiers are sent to fight distant wars in places that nobody gives a rip about. Americans don't give a hoot about all of these places. It was several years ago, they had an incident where there was a squad of American special forces who were ambushed, and several Americans were killed. And it was in a place called Niger. And I was giving a speech about these bizarre battles we were fighting. And suddenly it occurred to me, I don't know where Niger is. Where is that place? I had to pull over to the road. I had to research, and it is to the north of Nigeria. But it's so obscure that somebody who's spent a lifetime in foreign policy has to research to figure out where it is. But yet, the Pentagon, the deep state, the State Department, they're willing to send these guys off and have them die in a hurl of gunfire somewhere in the jungles in a place that nobody knows about. So this is happening, and it is we're diminishing the value of citizenship because we allow people from all these third world countries to come in and just seize it illegally. And it's really, I think there may come a time if we ever fight where we're in desperate combat, which I define as combat where you don't know who will prevail on the battlefield. If we get in that type of combat, you're going to have a lot of people who will say, given everything else that's going on, I don't think I'm going to do it. And we'll institute the draft, and the draft will fall apart because nobody will be willing to serve. They'll all evade the draft. We're getting very close to that. We may have reached that point already. And if we're wise, we will stay out of these stupid wars in Ukraine and Gaza and all this other stuff. It's an interesting time. And as you say, there's a certain block of people who have a military tradition. when we fought the Spanish-American War, it's around 1898, I think, and we actually had former Confederate soldiers brought in as generals to lead the effort in the Spanish-American War. When we fought World War I, huge portion of the forces were from the South. And these were people whose fathers or grandfathers had served in the Confederate Army. Great patriots, wonderful, lovers of this country. When we went into World War II, tremendous portion were Southerners who were wonderful patriots, and you know, certainly we've watered down our population over time and so forth, but still, I know in Vietnam there were I can remember there was somebody with a helmet. He had written something about West Virginia on there, and surprisingly, many West Virginians were deeply sympathetic with the Confederacy. It wasn't an anti-Confederate thing. It was a little more complex. But anyway, you'd see Tennessee written up on the Georgia. I was from Florida. My radio man who died right beside me, he was from Florida. So we'll see where this country goes. But I'll tell you what, our military is facing some tough time. If Trump wins this election, he had better purge the political and the military bureaucracy of the Pentagon and just go after it hammer and tong. So, okay, well, let's move on. And Jim, I'd like to hear a little bit what you think about this next topic. The voters of Argentina have essentially staged an electoral revolt against socialism. And an outsider, Javier Milei, has triumphed with a strong win. And so, can you tell us a little bit about this, Jim?
As I understand it, Mr. Milei, his platform is essentially a make Argentina great again. That they have to make some radical changes over the policies of the last few decades that have just run the country in the ground, and particularly have made the Argentine peso virtually worthless. And obviously a big portion of the population, a majority, very good majority, supports him in doing this. Maybe in some ways he reminds you of Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, who has also made radical changes in that country, and has so far been doing it quite successfully. So, you know, I don't know if this is so much a swing from the left to the right as much as it is from insanity to sanity. Let's try to get some reasonable policies that will actually get this country back on its feet. I do see a couple warning flags here. He wants to get rid of the peso, which I understand is a great idea. But he wants to put it on the US dollar. And while the dollar is very strong internationally now, partly because so many other currencies are taking a beating, I'm not sure for the long term that's necessarily the way he wants to go. That, you know, given the future of the dollar in the I think inescapably multipolar world now, where the petrodollar is not going to reign supreme anymore. He probably needs to be careful about that. He also indicated he wants to cut down on trade relations with Brazil and China, which are Argentina's biggest trading partners, especially Brazil, right next door. And of course, they have a leftist government in Brazil, but geography is something you have to take into account. So, if he proceeds carefully, I think he can probably do well. He does have a head of steam behind him politically. My concern is he ends up being some kind of I hate to use this expression, controlled opposition, where he talks big during the campaign, and then once he gets in office, he ends up following a lot of the same policies as his predecessors. So I think we should give him the benefit of the doubt and see if he can do some good. But I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. Let's remember Argentina, and a century or 120 years ago was one of the richest countries in the world. I mean, it was that's why one reason why there's so many people. Majority of Argentines are actually ethnic Italians in terms of their ethnic background, because so many people from Italy and other European countries, Germany, elsewhere, migrated to Argentina because it was kind of like America. It was like a place where people went to make their fortune and build a great country, a great economy. And of course, that all went by the wayside during the middle part of the 20th century and really hasn't gotten any better. So let's hope he can do some good. I wish them well.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting development. Argentina, throughout most of our lifetimes has been a very troubled country. In 1913, it was wealthier than Germany and France. And by 1950, its GDP per capita was roughly what Western Europe had. And but Juan Perón was a hardcore socialist who was elected president in 1946. And ever since then, it has gone on this downward trajectory, and the country has been plagued by debt, inflation, and political instability. It's interesting. He apparently he's a very brash individual, and one of the quotes that was made in a particular article said, quote, "We are tired of Peronism. Milei is an unknown, but better a madman than a thief." And I thought that was kind of funny. I don't think he's a madman, but he certainly is unconstrained in his way. He's very, very much like Donald Trump. He's brash, he's forceful, and people compare him to Trump and also to Bolsonaro of Brazil. But I think I agree with you. It would be a mistake for him to try to interfere with foreign trade. They need all the trade they can get. And while I don't have the same concern about swapping out the inflated peso for a dollar, that at least the dollar has some value, and it is good currency in the Western Hemisphere. He does say, he says, "I'm going to dynamite the central bank to end inflation." No, I don't think he means that literally, but figuratively, it's a good way of putting it. The Argentina owes $44 billion in debt, which is coming due, and I think he's going to have to say, "Not paying it, forget it." Usually, we keep countries subservient by constantly, refinancing, putting more debt on them. I think he's just got to wipe it out and just go bankrupt and say, "Heck with it. We can't do it." I don't know, that some people would disagree, and perhaps they'd be right. But there is this trend throughout Latin America where the old static political parties filled with corruption and self-dealing, they're being rejected by very powerful outsiders who are attacking the political class and making strong substantive promises for the future. I think honestly, I think we need stronger promises, even than what Trump has done. I think we need to get away with the notion of asylum. We need to start attacking the right to asylum. I don't think there should be a right to asylum. I think our country and every sovereign country should decide for itself whether to grant entry to someone based on this or that. It should be the decision of sovereign nations, not the decision of some UN treaty that we have signed on to. So it is exciting. I mean, Argentina is such a basket case at this point that you know it is a tough row to hoe. I don't know what will happen, but I certainly wish Milei all the best in what he's doing. We need not an armed revolution, but we need an intellectual, a philosophical revolution that rejects this superstitious nonsense about climate and global warming. We need to reject this notion that somehow you build a better nation by flooding your people with third world immigrants from all over with different religions and cultures and everything. And we need to get rid of this culture that we give priority to LGBT and the whole movement of pedophilia and transgenderism and grooming little children in our schools to become sex objects for these creatures that rape them. We need tremendous reform, and we don't need little tinkering around the edges by Washington insiders. So Jim, I'll let you have the final. I will tell people that we will be back on next Monday, and it'll be at 11 again. And I want to, before we have our sign off, I'll just thank you, Jim, for coming, and thank your family for all that they've done for America. And so at that, I'll leave it to you, and then Jose can sign us off.
Just a couple of closing thoughts based on what you said. Climate change, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's, he obviously does not buy into Milei doesn't buy into the climate voodoo. I couldn't help but thinking when you mentioned blowing up the central bank in Argentina, maybe this guy could take care of the Federal Reserve when he's done with that. So yeah, I mean, there is reason for hope. I'm sorry to say, of course, in these last elections here in Virginia, things went in the other direction. So if we're looking at some kind of a radical surgery to get this country back on track, we'll have to see what happens next year. But this past election was not the kind of bellwether we were looking for. So it's still going to be, as you say, a tough row to hoe.
Well, thank you, Jim.
Thank you.